Do you wish you could get virtual attendees to turn their cameras on? Is engagement the number one issue on your virtual meetings? Do you want your meeting to be the most engaging virtual meeting? Well, welcome to the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. In this podcast, we'll talk to the top people around the world in virtual meetings and give you, the listener, the best ideas to host engaging virtual meetings. Make sure that you click subscribe so you can get the latest episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. Now, let's welcome your host, the author of the #1 Amazon hot new release, Engaging Virtual Meetings, John Chen. All right. Geez, is it a happy Tuesday? Is that what day of the week it is? Oh, yeah, it is Tuesday. So glad that we got another chance to do an Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. So let's see, what was the highlight this weekend? Last Saturday, I was the virtual producer for Bob Pike. He's a Training Legends celebration of life. And here's the smartest idea of the week. Hold a celebration of life before you pass away. Sounds easy. It was great to be able to do that. That video is going to get released tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/engaging virtual meetings. It is 90 minutes that I highly suggest you take time to watch. One, just to see... if you really want to see a trainer or a speaker, that there's multiple speaker Hall of Fame inductees who are the speakers for this part. And number two, that Bob has really dedicated his life to training, being the trainer's trainer, training other trainers how to train. Yeah, I love that he tried to explain that to his mom, and his mom eventually described him as a motivational speaker. So anyways, watch the 90 minutes. It's really great and amazing. Now, my next guest is coming up here, and I got a chance to meet people from the Nerdmasters. What is the Nerdmasters? Well, it turns out that a bunch of people from Toastmaster chapters around the world collaborated together at the beginning of the pandemic and said, what are we going to do with all of our Toastmaster meetings? And I was excited, number one, to present to them, and number two, to meet some of their members. I'm going to introduce you to one of the members here in Washington State. Of that, he also shoots amazing photographs as well as does database work here in Seattle. Let's welcome to the stage the one and only Merlyn Miller. Hey, Merlyn, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. All right. So first off, cherry blossoms behind you.
Yep.
Right? It was cherry blossom season earlier this year. Where did you take this photo?
This is out my backyard.
Oh my gosh!
Tree just explodes, and I say I got to take a picture of that.
And you live here in Washington. What city in Washington State?
I live out in the middle of nowhere, over in what I describe is, when you look at the map, at least the old school maps, you had the little hook, and you had Seattle, and you had the little hook. And if there was not a place there that had a dot there was a city. There actually was, and it's named Port Angeles. There's also Sequim that's just a little bit east of us, but which is the Banana Belt.
Well, hopefully you're enjoying the fact that you get to work from anywhere these days. So that's really one of the keys. Why don't you do us a favor, Merlyn? Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and maybe add a little bit more about what you've done with Nerdmasters. Thanks, Merlyn.
Well, as your intro indicated, I am Merlyn Miller. I have been a Toastmaster for about 5 years. Recently, well, not recently, the last couple of years, I've been involved with two different clubs, one of them named Nerdmasters, which is basically, it was a group of nerds in our district that decided to get together and help the district get set up with Zoom, because without Zoom, we would have had to have pretty much not have any meetings at all. And I've also worked for Microsoft, worked for Boeing, worked for AT&T Wireless. I found it easy to work for Boeing, hard to work for Boeing once. Both times I worked, there was a plane crash, a new president, a dip in the economy, and massive layoffs at Boeing.
Oh, you're talking about when the lights went out in Seattle, Boeing? Was it that time?
No, this was 2000 and 2008.
Oh, 2008, the other
Yeah,
time
yeah,
lights
yeah,
went out.
yeah, exactly.
Yes, Boeing has definitely gone through its changes. What a great, rich history, though, with Boeing. But it sounds again like Merlin that you've done a lot, especially with a lot of our large companies here in the Northwest. I want to just say hi to Greg Sanders. Greg Sanders says, "Celebrate life every day." So thank you, Greg, for tuning in here on virtual. Merlin, talk about why did you join Nerdmasters, or be like, spend some time and energy in that initial part. I'd love to hear kind of like what was going on in March of 2020 in your world, if you can take us back there.
Sure. I've been doing working going to my local club to actually learn a little bit more about speaking. And I got to say, you might hear a few ums and ahs and stumbles here and there, but quite frankly, Toastmasters got me out of my shell and I started learning how to speak. And then this opportunity for an advanced club came around, and I thought, let me try that. Let me see what's going on. And being a database developer, having that nerdy uh, background that I've got, I'm not just the cherry blossoms. I have been playing video games and working with computers for quite some time, and thought, well, let me see what this is like. And that's kind of what got me started with Nerdmasters. And I've been enjoying it since.
But now, and of course, Nerdmasters too. Again, there people came from different Toastmaster chapters, and what was the primary question that was really that you were trying to wrestle with in the beginning of March of 2020 when you formed Nerdmasters?
It was really, how are we going to get all of the clubs in Toastmasters online?
Right.
How are we going to teach them how to be Zoom masters? Which is kind of what you did with regards to when you came on and presented to us. You showed us what we can do and how to make things work and how to have a meeting, how to have an engaging meeting.
And what were some of like the early learning lessons, whether they were kind of disasters or they were, miracles that happened? I'm just kind of curious to see what was the early, because everybody was stumbling into online all at the same time. So I'd love to hear any great stories from like those first few meetings of what worked and what didn't.
I think what really worked, I can't really think of anything that didn't, other than the reticent, if I'm using that word correctly, the Luddites saying, "No, I'm not going to go online. I don't want to." As computer technology, and I don't blame them. As a technologist, I understand that a lot of it is overwhelming. You don't have to have, and I kind of teased you about this before when we met. You don't have to have 15 monitors on your desktop, and
Yeah,
for
most
any
people
reason
don't.
other than what you do. What you're doing right now is you have your own I own TV studio. You're actually producing your own TV show, and with all of that stuff, that looks a lot like Como for TV News, the ABC affiliate in Seattle. And you've got all the buttons and switches and monitors and everything to show what's going on, and you're producing a show. So that's
Yeah, the amazing part too, Merlin. That's right. Is most people don't need that. To get to the Toastmaster meeting. The best part is once you get past all that base level technology, and we actually call it Maven, which is like me. You got to show up, your audio, your video, right, your internet or your illumination, your lighting, and then your network. And once you get past those five basics, then it gets back into the hard stuff, right? What we love to say, we had this saying, Merlin, you probably know as a technologist, right? The hard stuff is easy and the soft stuff is hard. Do you know what I mean by that?
yeah, it's the easy part is just getting into it, and the soft stuff is like soft skills. It's like the idea of speaking. You can speak, but can you speak well? Can you articulate the words that you need to use in order to get your point across? And do you know how to, like, one of the examples is what I just did there, which was a pause to get my
Yes.
point across. That can be very powerful to really get your point across, instead of just rambling on really, really quickly and talking really, really fast and not really giving yourself time to breathe. And your audience is going to be going, what was he just saying?
It's amazing too, Merlin. Well, one of the things for those who have never been to Toastmasters, one of the roles that you can take, for instance, during a meeting, is someone who is counting ums and ahs and the filler words. And and also one of our good friends, if you those who are tracking the AI side, I believe every Toastmaster member now has access to Yoodli, Yoodli. I'm not getting any compensation from them, which is a tool. Right now, I'm actually running it, Merlin. I have a monitor that's in the center of my screen that has let's see what filler word that I'm using. So it does say although used to be my number one word, and using a tool like a Toastmaster, somebody counting, or an AI tool, it doesn't really matter what tool you use. It's helped me move from like the number one to the number six. And again, they give that number one tip, which is instead of the time that you're about to say is just say nothing at all. And that actually really helps the listeners with that. Merlin, what else have you found that Toastmaster has really given you as a gift?
Well, I think one of the things that I think I've really gotten out of it is we do this thing called table topics, which is
Yes.
a 1 to 2 minute speech where you have a topic like cherry blossoms. Talk about cherry blossoms, and so you got 1 to 2 minutes to talk about that topic. You can change it around. You can talk about trees. You can talk about cherries. You can talk about fruit or food, or say I've got this thing on my mind. The not to get too controversial, but the first thing that comes to my mind is the current situation in Hollywood with the strike. So I'm going to talk for 1 to 2 minutes about Hollywood's writers actors strike.
Yeah.
So that's something you can do, and doing it well as articulating a point within 1 to 2 minutes, kind of like I want to say a longer version, because I think elevator speeches are supposed to be shorter, but doing a longer version of an elevator speech, but getting to your point as quickly as possible, and then saying, you know, finishing up with, there you go, or whatever, finishing up your ending. I'm not doing it well at this point, but finishing your statement as much as you can, make your point, and then you let everybody think about it.
Find that transition point, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, what I've seen with this too, Merlin, is really useful. One is to not go too long, right? When you get past the 2 minute part, multiple of these filters now give you monologue warnings, like you're talking too long. So I think table topics are really useful in a way to help you manage the time to speak and make sure that you hand it back, of course, to the conversation, right, without taking all of the airspace. So,
Yeah, one of the lessons I learned recently, actually the other day, last week, I did table topics, and I started on one. I went twice as long as I should have, and when I saw the yellow, I reckon, because we have green,
cards.
you
Yeah.
need to start thinking about stopping. Yellow, okay, you're almost there. Red, you're going over. So I was on the yellow, and I went, okay, I'm going to finish up, but then I started on a completely different aspect of the topic that I was talking about. So I had basically two different toast or tabletop speeches.
And so, I was just recently, Merlin, at the National Speakers Association's conference called Influence. Imagine 1,100 professional speakers in the house, Merlin.
Wow.
And all of them, actually, it's so funny. There's a thread running on right now about somebody who's saying, I have a 60-minute keynote, but sometimes, like you're in a meeting, all of a sudden you only have 40, right? Something happened. The meal service was too long. The last speaker went on too long. And they were asking, this person was asking, how do I deal with a shortened time frame? And almost every speaker universally said, I don't care what you do, but end on time. Right. I don't know if you see the importance of that. Like two professionals can help you get back on time by not continuing to be late or be late.
That's important. You don't want to keep people up. You don't want to, for the situation with Nerdmasters, is we start at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we end at about 8:30. And we've got some people coming in from North Dakota that, it's already midnight there when we end. So they want to go to bed. And so we want to end as quickly as we can within that time frame. We want to get everything we want to get in, and then then end when we need to end so that we're not keeping people, because we'll see people drop off after a while.
See, that's the part too. Is I have a theory too, Merlin, which is that all of us come with invisible timers to a virtual meeting, right? And if the meeting sucks, right, the timer goes faster. If the meeting is interesting, right, engaging, you can actually buy back a little more time, right? But eventually, everyone at some point hits this point, which is like, I got to log off, right? I don't care how good it is, right? I'm out at some point. And so, anyways, I have this theory around people having invisible timers with that. Speaking of which, Merlin, I would love to hear what are some of your top tips in your experience, especially now you have so many Toastmaster meetings. What has to happen in a virtual meeting for it to be engaging for you, Merlin?
I think you kind of hit on it when you just talked about things being interesting, because that's something that I kind of liken it to television. Some people like watching Star Wars, some people like watching Star Trek. There's some people like watching both, some people only one or the other. Everybody's got a preference, and in order to be engaging, I think in the very base level, you need to have an interesting topic. If somebody wants to, if you're going to have a meeting about cherry blossoms or trees and the outdoors in general, that's going to bring in people that are interested in that. If they're interested in automobiles and cars or technology and they don't really care that much about cherry blossoms, then they're not going to be that engaged in the meeting.
So topic selection is also the right piece, for the group that you have to get something that's interesting with it. I'm curious too, Merlin, do you have any let's go back. In the last 3 years, what was like the most either interesting or engaging virtual meeting for you, Merlin? It could be Toastmasters, non-Toastmasters, but I'm just curious.
I think the one that stands out to me is one where we did a Halloween Halloween meeting.
Okay.
Where I was actually, I think it was my local club where we were online, and I got to put up an interesting graphic of me wearing a hat. Can't remember the the words that the what do they call them in the virtual. You can actually turn yourself into a dog or a cat, or there you go. You can wear the hat. I was wearing that, and I was pretending to be the shadow. So I darkened the room a little bit, and I started telling a story about things that go bump in the night. And then suddenly somebody screamed, and the horror of horrors, somebody left the seat up on the toilet. And that was interesting. I know, hearing other people talk about their experiences with Halloween, and that was one of the more engaging ones that stand out in my mind of meetings that was interesting. It was kind of fun, and it had some interest that I was involved with as well. And I think that made it interesting for me. That made it engaging for me.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. One of my similar meetings like that. I have a friend named Miriam Hadness. She runs an amazing conference called Never Done Before. And basically everyone who presents, Merlin, has to present something they've never done before. And a couple came in and they had actually turned on the gray filter. Here, let me see if I can turn on the gray filter. So they had put in the gray filter. Let's see. There it is. Like this is like black and white. And they did this whole piece where, what was the deal? Oh, they were talking about the dark side of facilitation, right? And so like there was this very dark theme, right? There was a whole bunch of other things like this. And without saying anything, almost everybody in the group followed along. Either we actually turned our cameras black or we actually turned black and white like this. And everyone kind of got into this part about, sometimes the dark side of virtual meetings. And so, what I think you're saying here too is that I don't think we play enough with themes on virtual meetings. A theme, like, again, the topic or the theme kind of drives what's going on. It does in like large conferences. And then the second part is the simple part of everyone sharing stories still is very high on the list. Merlin, have you ever heard of an author named Patrick Lencioni?
No, I haven't.
He wrote a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team that became a bestseller for team building in the corporate field. And one of his assignments is, he says, if you want to create psychological safety amongst a group, have everyone share a challenging childhood story, right? And once you do that, you'll find that just the simple act of it, kind of like sharing this Halloween story, it draws everybody closer and gets everyone to have an understanding. Merlyn, you grew up here in the Northwest. I'm just curious if you have a childhood story that you might be able to share. I'm happy to share one too.
Let's see. I'm not. It's been a long time.
Yeah, me too.
Challenging, challenging childhood story. Well, I it's hard because there's some stories I can tell, but I don't necessarily want to bring the bring the podcast down. I will say, I guess one of the challenging stories is kind of it's a little dark.
Yes.
I got hit by a car
Oh my
when I was
goodness.
delivering papers, and I broke both my legs. And
Wow.
I think I have a way to make this a little funnier. Is that I had pins through my legs, so I was up in traction, and I'm watching after I think it was after they put me in a body cast after they take the pins out, and I'm watching Laurel and Hardy, and Laurel and Hardy are in the hospital. Hardy is in the bed, he's in traction, and Laurel is messing with the traction, and I'm laughing, going, "Oh, that looks like it hurt." Oh, ow! you know, I'm cringing, but I'm laughing at the same time, and that was kind of a challenge of dealing with that. But actually, humor is something that dealing with, and I mentioned dark childhood here.
Right.
I humor is, as you can kind of tell, I've got a cherry branch through my head like Steve Martin. Well, you know, so I laughter has been a great thing for me, and that's that's the challenge, is to figure out how to deal with a lot of the traumas in life, and we all deal with a little bit of trauma at least.
Did you get a chance to see Steve Martin and Martin Short's latest comedy special?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, it's Merlin. You are missing out. So it's on Netflix if you have Netflix. Otherwise, you got to borrow it from somebody. But they did a comedy special, kind of like right at, I guess, at the beginning or in the middle of pandemic, where as soon as it started to open up, and it is one of the most genius theater comedic timing pieces of two comedic masters going at it at each other sometimes on stage. So I can only highly recommend it to you, Merlin.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. It sounds familiar, like I think I've heard about it. I may have even seen bits and pieces of it. My first thing is to think about Only Murders in the Building that they're doing together on Netflix, or is it Hulu?
Oh, that I have
That,
not. I've heard about that. It's on my playlist, but I have not gone to begin to watch. But most people I say it is also. It's great to see some of these actors in the elder stage still rocking out some things. What did I also see? Did you see 80 for Brady recently?
no, I didn't.
80 for Brady is like the four women who go to the Super Bowl for Tom Brady. And that also turns into a masterclass because it's four very, very, very famous actresses or actors,
Oh,
if I'm correct, who aren't working because we're on strike. But now we're
yeah.
full circle. So here, I'll give you a story back here, Merlin. You gave me
Okay.
you're gonna give me a story, which is that's what's this finger right here. If you can see this finger right, is not quite
Yeah.
exactly right. I was a sponsored amateur skateboarder, Merlin, and so my challenging childhood stories. I had learned a move where you put the skateboard on your feet and you walk around on your hands, and the skateboard is on your feet. But the problem is, one time I tipped my foot and the board came down and it fell completely down sideways across my pinky, right? And it crushed all the bones inside of my pinky. And then, of course, what did they do? Well-meaning doctors and nurses, they taped these two pieces together. So if you see this, right, which is great, except the problem is that now that's taped exactly to my knuckle. And so now I actually should have probably put like two boards or three boards on above and below it when it was healing, as opposed to letting them tape it to my two knuckles. So, I still continued to skateboard after that.
Oh, okay.
What was it? There's a movie called Dogtown and Z Boys. I was actually sponsored. I was actually given free products to skateboard at one time in my life, Merlin.
Wow.
So there we go. So Merlin, I'm curious about you're a nerd slash tech guy. I want to know what are some of your favorite technologies that you're using. So it could be, I mean, it could be Zoom. I know we're all kind of here on Zoom. I'm curious about either your favorite feature on a platform or if you're using any tools outside of a platform, say like Mentimeter or Miro or anything else. What are some of your favorite technologies that you're using, Merlin?
Not really doing too much in anything extra, anything new and fancy other than, and I think I want to say, as you talk about technologies, I'm going to probably throw something out that a lot of people aren't going to think about is video games.
Yeah.
I've been looking at video games. There's a car mechanic simulator, which is you're building cars, and it's kind of like creating the old 125th scale models or airplane models that people used to do back in the day,
Oh.
30, 40 years ago. Uh, there's a power wash simulator that I haven't played. Just looking at the technology, looking at what they've been able to do with gaming. One group created a game. There's a game called Fallout 4. Fallout franchise and Fallout 4. They've got a bunch of modders who modded the game, and what they ended up doing, and they got a little trouble with this, is they took the technology to take all of the voice acting in Fallout 4, which the new go ahead and look up Fallout TV show, and you'll get some ideas of what Fallout is all about. It's a post-apocalyptic, what would they call it? Atom Punk game,
Right.
or Atom Punk world, and they took these voice actors and changed up the voices just so that you could have better and different dialogue than you had before. They got
Oh.
in trouble with it because it was so realistic, and they weren't paying the original voice actors for this. they but they did it rather believably, and a lot of people said, "Oh, this mod is really great." And then suddenly, of course, somebody got wind of it. The voice actors got wind of it and went, "Yeah, you need to stop that."
Are you saying is it on what? Well, one is this kind of like what do they call that? There is fan fiction, which is fans take like a storyline and make their own stuff. Is that what they were trying to do?
It is like fan fiction, except in a video game, it's sometimes it's their own stories, sometimes it's I want to play the game this way. I want to play Minecraft with uh, trains, and so I want to create a mod that allows me to create trains in Minecraft, and which is not something you can normally do.
Got it.
There we go. There's some Fallout stuff.
And again, it is a TV show currently on Amazon Prime, and so I would love to hear too. Merlin, if you play these games, you must have thoughts then on the gamification, right? Which is the learning of skills, right? Where gamification quite often is defined as using game mechanics in a non-game setting. Do you have any thoughts on the gamification based on your gaming experience?
I think it's a great idea. The idea of using games to actually educate or do something else, making it fun. We did a Nerdmasters. We did a gamification meeting where the theme of the meeting was gamification. We talked about making games out of meetings, making it fun, using virtual reality, or making a little game out of who is going to do table topics when and what the table topic is going to be about. We did a lot with that, and gamification can make more things engaging, not just meetings, but anything else engaging. So people are actually interested in, because I talked about Minecraft, and Minecraft has an educational component where you can have kids learn about, I believe it's about chemicals and chemistry. So they have all the chemicals in there. You can actually make things out of the chemicals, and it's really rather interesting how you can actually use a game which is not as realistic as a lot of games are out there today. It's really kind of an outlier, but it's also one of the most, or I say one of, it is the most sold game in history right now.
Which game is that?
Minecraft.
Oh, of course, Minecraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's created its own culture and sub
Yes.
games and economy. It has objects inside of it. I wanted to share this. I don't know. Have you ever heard of something called GameCon, Merlin?
I may or may not have.
So this is
Not
GameCon.
that.
Yeah, this is a gamification, the only live event
Oh,
for
okay.
gamified and game-based corporate training and adult education. This is our good friends Monica Cornetti, who leads this charge. It's co-located with TechLearn, which I will be in New Orleans in September, by the way. So if you're going to be in New Orleans in September, let me know. But this is GameCon, and they really take a chance here about collecting people. Usually they get about 150 or so or more people from around the world who basically spend almost all their time gamifying stuff, Merlin. So you should check it out. They also have a really cool free series called Game Garage. Game Garage used to happen every Friday. I think it's just about to come back, and it was actually an offshoot from the virtual training magazine conference, where it was actually one of the top 3 highest rated sessions out of 150 sessions. So they decided to keep doing it, and they ran it for a good 9 months, having different people who are experts in gamification allow you to see a 60-minute session for free. So that a lot of
Oh,
these
wow.
gamification people were donating their time to really try to and spread the craft a little bit more. Speaking of the craft, Marilyn, I'd love to hear too. You've been around the block a few times, like I have, and I really want to know, what do you see in the future of virtual or hybrid? What do you think you see, or what is something on your wish list that you wish that would happen right before we have our own celebration of life?
One of the things I'm thinking about the future of video format of virtual formats. I know that there's a desire to make it all 3D. They put the headset on and walk around the room and you can touch things and they're not, like I'm in my office is in my bedroom and I've got the bed over here and I've got the dresser over there and I can physically touch that, but with the glasses on, I can, be in outer space or I can be in a orchard with cherry trees and I can pick the cherries. That's great, but I think that there's also something uh, to in-person meetings, and I don't think it's going to replace in-person meetings. I think the future is going to be much more interesting, where people are using the technology uh, to enhance in-person meetings or enhance communication in general. Like we can communicate. I don't have to drive to Seattle. I've been in Seattle. I've driven in Seattle for 20 years.
Yeah.
I was there a couple of weeks ago. Drove from Linwood to Everett. It was fun, kind of. I mean, I kind of enjoyed it, but it was not something I miss. I don't miss Seattle traffic.
Oh, and by the way, it is back with a vengeance.
Oh,
I recently had a 19-minute drive turn into an hour and 22.
oh. Yeah,
And
I remember 2 hour drive that usually took like 30, 45 minutes, and it was because a bus had jackknifed up by Linwood,
oh,
and I was downtown.
so Merlin, I agree with you on the in-person part, and I think you might appreciate the technical explanation I have. This is what I wrote this probably over a decade ago, and it's called the theory of bandwidth, right? You know that like the little bit of bandwidth is like we can send text, then we can send audio, and then we can send video. Right now we're sending audio and video, and so until this bandwidth can match all of the things that we experience in the in-person world, right? Because no one's gotten anywhere close to like smells or scents or taste, right, from the internet, things like that. And so until it replaces that, there's nothing that's going to replace an in-person meeting until one day. Like the holodeck. I'm sure you've watched.
Yeah.
You clocked a little Star Trek. The holodeck has attempted to replace all of those things, and that's kind of like the wish and the dream. But until that moment happens, right? Again, virtual is going to play a place somewhere in between here, where this is, the in-person experience is still one of the top premium experiences. And, I hopefully you've seen too, just by being a member of Nerdmasters, it has shown you can create community online. Like some of
Yeah.
these people I've
Yeah.
never met, right, ever in person.
Yeah, and some of the people I would have never had the opportunity to meet. Like I wouldn't have the opportunity to meet you.
Yeah.
Although I might have lived in Seattle for 30 more years and you worked for Microsoft for a while and I worked for Microsoft, but we never really met. So it there's a lot out there. And there's both in-person meetings have their advantages and disadvantages as well as online. Now there's definitely things you can do in in-person meetings that you can't do in virtual meetings and vice versa. And I think that's going to be exciting to see is what we can do with the technology.
Yep. What can we do with it? And, and what can we do now? And of course, what can we do inside of the future? It really opened the doors too. One of my part of my story, Merlyn, is that I've been trying to get people online for over 35 years. And even when we had the technology like to this level, prior to 2020, people for the most part wouldn't do it. And that just gets like your Luddites you were talking about. There will still be that, even if it's technically possible, there still might be this human piece that might be resistant to it. But I am interested now in the future because we have certainly, for a generation, wiped that barrier out, right?
Yeah.
Because now everybody had to be at least online, most likely at least once in the last 3 years.
Yeah. One of the explanations of technology, people getting into technology, removing the Luddite was one of the guys had his father was just, he did not want a smartphone. He just didn't want a cell phone at all. And then suddenly he figured out that he could use his smartphone to check up on his favorite football team.
Right.
So it was like they just needed a reason, something that they were interested in to actually use that technology.
Yeah, you kind of like what I call the killer app, right? As the light bulb is the killer app for electricity, right? Which is like electricity by itself is not that useful, but as soon as you can turn on a light, you're like, oh wait, we can really do some stuff here. I felt like grandkids was the killer app. So a lot of people, a lot of the older generation finally got on things like Facebook because their grandkids pictures were being put there, and that was the only way they were going to get them, right? So
Yeah, I didn't have to call. Well, I mean, you could call them and talk to them on the phone, but now you can watch them scamper around the backyard.
yes, yeah. So all those things are changing. Well, let's do this, Merlyn. If somebody was listening to this interview, what's the one thing you want them to remember from this interview?
Well, to remember that you don't have to get really excited about technology, just and being in an engaging meeting. You don't have to be that way, but you look for what you want. Look for what it motivates you and what engages you. And also, I think that we just kind of hit on it. Experiment a little bit. You're not
Yes.
going to know what you like until you try it. And that's just something that, as a Toastmaster, it's like I really didn't know what I was going to like about Toastmasters when I started. I kind of knew, hey, that might be interesting to try it. Let me see what I can do. And I've got some things I could say and speeches I could do and topics I could come up with. And I wouldn't have known whether or not it would have been for me or not until I tried it. And that's to me the big takeaway, I think, of all of this is don't worry about it too much, but just look and see if there's something that you can get into.
Thank you, Merlyn. Keep an open mind and
Yeah.
try some new stuff, even here in 2023, for crying out loud. Try some new stuff and see and remember the stuff that you love the most. Merlyn, thank you so much for spending a little time here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. We've just been visiting with Merlyn Miller, one of the members of Nerdmasters, one of the Toastmasters offshoot that formed together to really deal with COVID and moving all of these in-person meetings online. Thanks, Merlyn, for your piece here. If you want to be the next guest, make sure and click the link, engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet. And you too could be the next guest here on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. And by the way, the podcast is out, www.engagingvirtualmeetings.online. We are just past our 10th released episode. By the way, if you subscribe, there are enough episodes that are queued up. You're going to be getting one every Wednesday for the next 2 years. So make sure and subscribe there, and I look forward to seeing you next time online. This is John Chen, the author of the Amazon #1 hot new release, Engaging Virtual Meetings. I personally want to say thank you for listening to the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast. It is my passion to help you eliminate bad virtual meetings. Make sure that you click subscribe so that you can get the latest episode of the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast with all of the latest ideas. Hey, I want to meet you. If you want to talk about a virtual meeting challenge, or if you want to be the next guest on the Engaging Virtual Meetings podcast, just go to engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet. That's engagingvirtualmeetings.com/meet, MEET, and find your best time to meet up. Thank you, and I look forward to engaging with you online.